D-Mace, Vingen, and Donick, 1025, 1063. The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingen here with you on a dreary Tuesday in Nashville. And Titans fans, I'm sure you've heard the old phrase, misery loves company. Well, good news. There are two other teams that are just as miserable as the Tennessee Titans because the two remaining winless teams are still winless after losing on Monday Night Football. The Jacksonville Jaguars were absolutely walloped by the Buffalo Bills, 47-10 last night. It was 34-3 at halftime. So the Bills could have played their backups in the second half and
I couldn't believe
had
that.
no issues.
That was an embarrassment.
And then, in addition, the Cincinnati Bengals are now also 0-3 after losing 38-33 to the Washington Commanders in Cincinnati. Jaden Daniels had a spectacular game, and we'll talk about that. But I know there's not a lot to like about what you've seen from the Tennessee Titans so far this season. But if you are looking for some sort of solace, at least your team is 0-3 and not paying its quarterback an average of $55 million per season as the Jacksonville Jaguars are paying Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, and it didn't look good for Trevor Lawrence yesterday. Overthrown passes, didn't look comfortable in the pocket. It looks as if he's regressed as a quarterback. His decision making isn't his decision making isn't where it needs to be. Considering this is his third year in the NFL. This is his second year within that offense. I think Doug Peterson is a good play caller and a good head coach. But for some reason, they can't put it all together offensively, nor can they put it together defensively. So it's just surprising to see Jacksonville, after they've given Trevor Lawrence the mega contract, they can't seem to get over the hump or get out of their own way. This is a disappointing team. And I'm sure their fan base they got to be in the same place the Titan fan bases are. Even though they feel, based upon the pay, they got their franchise quarterback. Well, pay is one thing, play is the other. He got paid a lot of money, but he's not playing worth the money that he's been given. So, that's the silver lining for Titans fans is that Jacksonville is 0-3. Indianapolis is 1-2, and Houston is 2-1. 2-1. So there's still some hope, a glimmer of hope still there.
And I'm supposed to be the half full guy. D-Mace is over here preaching hope. I love it. I have always had the mindset I'm not worried about exactly how many games. I've said this many times, so I'm not coming up with this after the team goes 0-3. For the record, I've been saying I'm not worried about what the one-loss record is. It's more, what am I finding out about this group? Am I building a nucleus? Am I adding to a group that I can win with in the coming years? And ideally, you really have a good team when it's time to open the new stadium. And from a business standpoint, with what they're charging for PSLs, which is ridiculously high, and I don't like the concept of PSLs anyway, and I think I'm not alone in that, they better be good when they open that stadium, or they're going to have a little problem. They're going to have problems selling those PSLs to begin with. But I think step one is, regardless of whether they win 5 or 6 or 8 or surprise everybody and be that rare team that digs out of an 0-3 hole, they need to be building for in the coming years. And that's really what it is. But it has great perspective on Will Levis. If you are a Dolphins fan right now, or a Jags fan, or even a Bengals fan, they've invested so heavily in these quarterbacks. At least if you're a Bengals fan, you know how good Joe Burrow is. But it is disappointing if you're sitting there going, man, we've got supposedly the quarterback that's supposed to lead us here, and we're still 0-3. That's a little different because getting out from under Will Levis is nothing. Really, if it doesn't work, he just joins a long, long list of quarterbacks who were given a shot and weren't the guy. If that happens, the Titans will move on to the next guy, and they will not be out an enormous investment, which is what maybe the Jags are facing right now.
Spot Track tweeted this last night. Quote, in extending Trevor Lawrence this summer, the Jaguars turned a 2-year, $31.3 million remaining contract into what is effectively a 5-year, $202 million deal. Lawrence's contract covers 7 years, $306.3 million in total.
That's a lot of money for below average play. And I'm sure when they gave him the contract, they didn't think that they would be getting this type of play from Trevor Lawrence. But he has been, like Will Levis, he has been the reason why, or one of the reasons why, the Jacksonville Jaguars are 0-3. But the bad thing about them is, like you said, they paid him already. The Titans hadn't paid Will Levis. So, if they choose to move on, it wouldn't be a financial hit to the organization. But with all that being said, the Titans are still, if you believe in, a team just going on a run and putting itself back in the mix, because of what the AFC South is doing, the records within AFC South, they still have an opportunity to put themselves in a position where they're not completely out of it. And one of the reasons is they've only played one AFC game. They haven't played a game within the division, and they haven't played an AFC team outside of the Jets. So that could be glass half full sort of scenario for me.
Another part of that too, D-Mace, that I think is important is, as of today, there is no indication, and we did it. We all did an exercise last night of trying to find quarterbacks who were kind of in the situation that Levis is in now, where teams sat him for a little bit and then brought him back, and we can't find very many. Just a sneak preview. We're going to go over it more in detail later. But what you said, staying in the race, being competitive enough to where, number one, you feel good about yourself on at least a few Mondays where you're like, okay, we're making progress here. But also playing a season, if you're Levis, you're getting a true evaluation, and it's not a team that is woefully out of it by midseason. Because let's use the Predators a couple years ago when they decided to sell at the deadline. But what happened was John Hines, to his credit, and the young players who got a chance to play, they were able to keep themselves in contention all the way until the end of the season. And while they didn't make the playoffs, they got to evaluate young players in games that did have some meaning. They weren't just, hey, if they win, great. If they lose, hey, I'd rather have you lose because it's going to drop you. It's going to have you in a better draft position. If you get into that mode, and then a guy plays a couple of great games at quarterback in December, and your record goes from 3-11 to 5-11, or 3-12 to 5-12
in Houston.
Is that a real true indication that a guy's making progress? Not as much as if you are still, hey, mathematically alive, and you win a couple games late in games that have playoff implications. That's I think a more true reading of what you have talent-wise.
To me, here's going to be, because I think they're getting to a point, and I mean the Tennessee Titans, they're sort of at that, how in the movie it's like, you got 10 minutes to get out of the building before the building explodes, and
Right.
you're running around and you're trying to do all this stuff, rescue people and do all this other stuff, and then you get to that critical and they're screaming, get out of there, and you finally run. They show the dramatic run and you diving through the building and the building explode. I don't know why you're not taken out, because you're like 2 feet away from the building as it explodes. Right. But I brought that up because the Titans are at this critical point right now. Because if they don't win this game, I think you seriously have to sit down as a coaching staff and a front office and say, is it better for us to make the switch now and see how the season goes, or stick with the quarterback no matter what? That's what they're gonna, because this season, the division after next week, it still will be sort of winnable in a sense, because you will be 2 games, 2 to 3 games out from the top, the top team, which is Houston. If Houston wins and say you win or lose, you're no more than what, 3 games back without playing that AFC South game. So you got to make the determination. That's why this game is the crucial game within the season, because if you lose, you might as well stick with them. I think if you lose this game, you might as well stick with them, because you're not going to win the division and you're not making the playoffs. You're just not. But if you win, do you then go to Mason Rudolph? Because my thing is, Will Levis has shown us who he is. I'm not sure is he going to get any better. I'm not sure he may get worse. I don't think so. But he is who he is. He's a quarterback that if everything is ideal, he's good. But the minute he starts to get a little pressure or anything around him, he becomes jittery. It seems like he loses awareness of what's going on around him. I looked at Jaden Daniels yesterday, and again, I don't know if Jaden Daniels is going to be a great quarterback or not.
Let's just point out what Jaden Daniels did yesterday for the Commanders. 21 of 23 passing, 254 yards and 2 touchdowns, 12 carries for 39 yards in the touchdown. He's the only rookie in the Super Bowl era to account for more touchdowns than incompletions in a game, minimum 20 attempts, including the playoffs.
It was a stunningly good performance.
But the thing about him was, it's not because rookies we saw Will Levis have a great game his first game out.
4 touchdown passes.
Exactly. So we saw, it's not even that, because he's played well all 3 games. Watch him in the pocket, the poise in the pocket. It looks as if he knows exactly what he's doing. It may not all work out, but it seems like he's the calmness within the storm out there, and he's able to run the offense the way the offense needs to be ran. Contrast that to Will Levis. He doesn't look anything close to that. And both of these guys have played they played the same amount of football, basically, in college and sort of in the pros. They played the same amount of football. Will's played, 8 games more because he was there last year. But when you look at both of them, they both played the same, right around the same amount of football. Jaden Daniels had 55 starts in college. I think Will Levis is right around that too. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, why doesn't Will Levis look like that? Because they played the same amount of football. I think Will Levis, from a arm talent standpoint, is better than Jaden Daniels, just from an arm talent standpoint. I'm not talking about running the football and all that other stuff. He's right there with them or even better. So why is Will Levis still having these same problems? Why does he look uncomfortable in the pocket? And I understand you could throw it you can blame the offensive line. I get it. But even when the pocket is clean, it's not like he go from completing 20% of his passes with stuff around him, and when the pocket's clean, he's completing 75 to 80%. It's not like that. He's still having trouble even when the pocket is clean.
I was struck by something I saw yesterday in Mike Sando's weekly, I think it's called the Pick Six column on The Athletic. And Mike Sando highlighted the turnovers that Will Levis has had, specifically the pick six and the fumble against Chicago, the fumble against the Jets, and the pick six and the fumble against the Packers. Now, Willie, you and I are both stats nerds. Mike Sando is referring to expected points added. So for those listening who may not know what that means, can you give us EPA? It's a very important stat for people who analyze the game. So can you give us the layman's explanation of what EPA is before I share this information?
I think it's an advanced look at what we tried to do yesterday and try to quantify exactly how many points the Titans have given away to the opposition, and then ask yourself, how in the world are you supposed to win an NFL game in a league like that? You think back to some of the most heartbreaking playoff losses the Titans have had. Ryan Tannehill's 3-interception performance against the Bengals. The game against the Ravens that D. Mace was a Raven in 2008.
Well, even when they lost a couple years ago to the Ravens.
Yes, and I would say too, right, the one in 2020 when there was not the whole fans. The game you played against the 2000 game against the Ravens, when you have the catastrophic plays that lead directly to points. We've done studies on what the team's record in those games. It's not impossible, but your winning percentage is so low in a game where famously in 2000, a blocked field goal for a touchdown and a pick six. I don't care how much better you are than the other team. You're just not going to win when those things happen. You turned the ball over 3 times in the red zone, which they did in the game against the Ravens in 2008, where you made the big play for the Ravens catching the bomb there, and they lost a very close game there. And then Tannehill, fresh in our memory there. So EPA, I think, is designed to say, okay, let's take some plays and basically say, is this leading to victory or is this hurting your chances of winning? And Will Levis this is just another fancy way of saying it, but putting in perspective exactly how much he's costing them with a few of these plays. These don't even count the block punts and the other things we covered.
So the plays that Sando is referencing, the pick six and fumble against Chicago, the fumble against the Jets, and the fumble and pick six against the Packers. So he lists them chronologically.
Right. And notice he doesn't include the late game interceptions, which are piled on. It still says Will Levis has thrown X interceptions. 2 of the interceptions are at the end of the game in sort of desperation mode. You can live with those, right? It's the interceptions in the context of when they happen. That's what really affects this stat.
So according to Sando, those 5 plays have cost the Titans a total of 31.23 expected points in games Tennessee has lost by a combined 30 points.
So that tells you everything you need to know right there.
How
much of a hole it's digging you.
It's when you are a team like the Tennessee Titans, where, listen, you don't have this explosive offense, or you don't have this, defense that's going to only allow 10 points a game. Everything you do opposite of that diminishes your chances of winning. So when you have, and again, this didn't even bring up the block punts and stuff like, things that were
Jeffrey
happening.
Simmons pull and shoot penalty
after which
led to a touchdown.
So
there's even more EPA in there. Than I think if you did a full EPA.
Yeah. So it's
brutal.
It's what are you doing to either help win football games, or what are you doing to lose the football game? And the Tennessee Titans, namely the offense, their quarterback, has cost them, based upon the EPA, have cost them basically each and every game that they've had.
So by game, the 2 turnovers against the Bears, according to Mike Sando, those 2 turnovers cost the Titans 12.5 expected points in a 7-point defeat. Against the Jets, the fumble cost the Titans 4.6 points in a 7-point setback. And the 2 turnovers against the Packers cost the Titans 14.2 points in a 16-point loss. So even if Will Levis did not directly contribute to the loss the way he did in Chicago, the giveaways he had against the Jets and the Packers were a significant part of why the Titans lost those games. Which you don't need fancy stats to know, but it is cool to see the numbers.
But
I don't know if cool is the right word, but that's the first thing that came to mind.
That right there tells me, and it should tell everybody else, that your team is not good enough to be. They're not even good enough to win when you don't have these turnovers. But when you have these turnovers, you're damn sure not good enough to win moving forward. So you either have to play flawless football each and every game, and we know that's not the case. That's not going to happen. Or you just hope your defense starts to get turnovers. Because if your defense doesn't get turnovers based upon this EPA, and if the trend keeps going, you will not win a damn game this season. I'm just going by the EPA and the trend, because you're not a good enough team to overcome 2 turnovers or 10 points off those turnovers. You're just not good enough. Now, if you don't turn the ball over, then okay, you have a shot. But if you turn the ball over and you're not getting any turnovers, you have no shot at winning because you're not good enough.
By the way, the Dolphins might be starting their 3rd-string quarterback on Monday. We know that Tua is out. Skylar Thompson, his backup, suffered a rib injury last week, and Tim Boyle, their 3rd-string quarterback, had to come in relief. And I guess we'll see what happens with Skylar Thompson this week. But Tim Boyle, 3rd-string quarterback Tim Boyle, might be starting against the Tennessee Titans for the Miami Dolphins next week. And if the Titans can't defeat Tim Boyle, say what you will about them losing to Malik Willis, if the Titans can't beat a 3rd-string quarterback, which Malik Willis was not too long ago, then we might have some issues.
Tim Boyle has started 5 games in his career. He has played for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams, and he's 0-5. So he's got the profile of your typical veteran 3rd-string quarterback. Yikes.
Okay, I'm looking for something here.
And if you're thinking, where did he play college? The answer is UConn and Eastern Kentucky.
So this tells you, what do you think the line is for the game? Don't even look. What do you think the line is for the game right now? Right now. It's in Miami, Monday night, 3rd-string quarterback.
A pick 'em.
I would say Dolphins by 1.
I say Titans by 3.5.
+1 Dolphins, which means even at home, you're only favored by a point. And it's really a pick 'em. At home, Miami's at home with a 3rd-string quarterback, and you're only, at this point in time, now I know the line can change before we get to Monday, but at this point, you are only a 1-point favorite against a 3rd-string quarterback. What does that tell you what people think about the Tennessee Titans right now? That tells me, I don't believe, even with the 3rd-string quarterback, and we don't even know who the 3rd-string quarterback is, I don't believe you're good. I believe you're just barely good enough to win against a 3rd-string quarterback.
Don't forget about Tyler Huntley, by the way. Dolphins have him on the practice squad.
Yeah, but will he play?
I mean, I think he's better than Tim Boyle. I wouldn't be surprised. Elevate him.
Could be. But then if Huntley plays, I think Vegas will then make Miami a 1-point favorite. But still,
well, I think
that tells you what they think about your team.
But it's an opportunity for the Titans.
It's not really an opportunity,
that
Willie, based upon Vegas.
Well, that they have not taken advantage of, right? I think what will be just, really tough to stomach is that you will have a game you're up 17-0 and hand it away to a team that's probably still not there. The Bears don't look like they're going to get there this year, right? They've got a lot of problems. They've struggled in the games since they played the Titans. The Titans made them look good by handing them a game that they were up 17-0. You have that game. You have a Jets game that you certainly did a ton to shoot yourself in the foot. Still felt like you could have won. And then 2 consecutive games where teams have really tough quarterback situations. If you can't take advantage of that, that would be very tough to stomach.
615-737 Back will join us. We'll get his thoughts on all of the quarterbacking around the NFL. Coming up next, Willie Donick, Derek Mason with Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Okay, let's tell you about Loan Pronto. Remember, the rates have gone down thanks to the Fed and Loan Pronto. They have reacted, and they are locking in homeowners at much better mortgage rates than before. Lowest in a couple of years, something like 4.9%, and as low as 4.59%. They just locked in a customer at that rate. So whether you got your loan last month or last year, Loan Pronto wants you to call right now, 615-499-5780, or go to loanpronto.com, because they might be able to get you in a much better situation with a refi, or if you need some cash, you can use this opportunity to get cash out of your home's equity and wipe out other big bills that have big mortgage, big interest rates like credit cards and whatnot. So you can do a cash out refi, get 50, 100 grand or more out of your home and use that to pay off those high interest debt piles of money that really hurt your monthly budget. So call right now and see if Loan Pronto can help you on either of these fronts. Tell them that I sent you, and just tell them to look at your stuff. No hard credit pull. They can give you a quote in minutes by calling 615-499-5780 or going to loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 1661781 on approved credit, NMLS consumeraccess.org.
D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason with Adam Vingan. And joining us on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, our friend Tim Hasselbeck. Tim, we opened the show discussing the other 0-3 teams in the NFL, the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Cincinnati Bengals. And from afar, I am shocked by what I have seen from Trevor Lawrence through 3 games. I suppose the simple question is, what's going on in Jacksonville, specifically with their $55 million per year quarterback?
Yeah, I think he's not playing well. I think, he's missed throws and he's made decisions that you wouldn't expect out of somebody that was drafted when he was drafted and invested in the way that he's been invested in. And, I think I definitely, I had a number of his games in college. So I just, remember watching him then, feeling like he was a great prospect, feeling like his first year in the NFL, you kind of had to throw away because of the environment there in Jacksonville, what he was exposed to. And I think it's been a bit of a head scratcher in terms of what we've seen from him since. So I do think there are better days ahead for him because I think that he's kind of, mentally made of the right stuff in terms of being able to weather the storm of the adversity. And I guess, the slump of kind of how he's played. But he needs to start to do it, right? A little bit of some of the stuff that we've talked about with Will Levis in terms of, I think the conversation last week was rewiring your brain to make good decisions, in critical moments. I think a similar thing has to happen with Trevor.
Tim, let's focus on the Titans. This past Sunday, Malik Willis had the best game of his young NFL career at Nissan Stadium as the Packers defeat the Titans 30-14. I think there are a lot of Titans fans that see what Malik Willis was able to do and view it as an indictment of the development that, or lack thereof, that the Titans were unable to get out of Malik Willis. In your opinion, how much should, if at all, Malik Willis's performance on Sunday against the Titans reflect on the Titans' player development?
Yeah, I think in some ways that's unfair. And I say that because, like, just look at the current group, right? Like, you have a brand new coaching staff this year. And so when you come in, everybody was completely on board with, okay, the starting quarterback is going to be Will Levis this year. Like, that's how we enter in with that expectation, right? Well, there's only so many reps. And then you also make a decision like, all right, well, we're not going to go into this season with Will Levis and then another young, inexperienced quarterback. And so you go out and you sign Mason Rudolph. And so, like, while we can talk like competition and player development and all that stuff, like, the reality is like, it's kind of was already, the decision was made. And that's not unique to the Titans. Like, that's the same case, pretty much everywhere. Look, I've used the Giants as a, somewhat of a comp, in terms of the quarterback situation, because it's like Daniel Jones is going to be their quarterback. So he just is. Like, that decision is made. He's not competing for the job. He's going to be their quarterback. And then the backup quarterback is going to be Drew Lock. Like, they signed him for a reason. Like, Tommy DeVito, I'm sorry, is not competing with him for that spot. And so, I think that, when you look at player development and competition, unfortunately, the way it works in the National Football League sometimes is like the decision is just made. And that's not an indictment on player development. That's just the reality of reps and time that you have to get people ready. So, could you say, yeah, but do you want to keep, Malik Willis on the roster? Sure. But I think there are a lot of people, probably myself included, that were surprised and impressed that you even got anything in return when you traded him. Like, to me, I think the rest of the league probably would have looked at Malik Willis as a camp, casualty and a street free agent. So I think in some ways that's unfair. Now, saying all of that, like, is it a bad look and does it hurt to lose to Malik Willis? Yeah, of course it does. But I do think that there's like another side of that coin.
We'll talk with Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst and head coach of the Innsworth Tigers. Congratulations Tim, on another victory this past week
5-0
versus
ends with
Lipscomb.
Tigers, teammates. So 5-0 ends with Tigers.
Oh, excuse me.
Come on.
The 5-0 once again Innsworth Tigers. They could possibly just be the best team in the state of Tennessee. But looking at Will Levis, Tim, why do you? Is it just the offensive line issue, or is it a Will Levis issue? Because it still seems like he has trouble processing fast enough to consistently play at a level that he needs to play at in order for this team to win. It seems like when you're watching film, and I know it's different from a quarterback, it's like, sort of like hindsight, but when you're watching the film, it just seems like either he doesn't trust himself to throw some of those short passes, or he's just not processing it quick enough and not seeing it.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both things in terms of that. And I think that I don't think it's fair to say that the offensive line, or protection in general is a problem. But I do think, like, I'll give you a good example. Sam Darnold.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Sam Darnold's thrown 8 touchdown passes this year. He's played really, really well. If you watch this past weekend, like, they did an incredible job protecting him. And so if you wonder, like, man, why is Sam Darnold playing so much better? It's like, well, look, no one has ever doubted that Sam Darnold could make the throws. But he's just probably been in some environments that weren't great. And so it's helped him play really well so far. And so I think that that's always the case with all of these quarterbacks. I really do. Like, across the board, I think when you look at them and you look at, like, is there a true pocket? Is there space between, the quarterback and like, there's pretty much everyone in the league, like, can make the throws. Mm-hmm. So I do think, like, the better that you can be at that, then yeah, I think that it helps the processing. It helps seeing it clearly. It helps all of that stuff. So that can always be better. Now, I do think that then there's this other side of it, which is, okay, when it's not perfect and it is in your lap a little bit as a quarterback, and you do have to speed up your decision, and you do have to trust, okay, it's not there, and so the ball's got to go here, and this has got to be the clock in my head timing. Are there guys that are doing that at a high level that are masking protection issues? Yeah, 1,000% they are. And Will Levis just isn't at that point right now. He's not. And so I think trying to get him to play a little bit more like Kirk Cousins than like, somebody that's trying to create, I think that's the right way to coach him.
Because I look at the example of, you brought up Darnold, but I look at Dalton and Young, what's going on in Carolina. It was a garbage show with Young, but then you put Andy Dalton in under the same sort of situations and it looks better. So what it tells me is not, even though the line isn't great, it's really the quarterback and his ability to either not see the field or process it fast enough, because you bring in a veteran guy who's working under the same circumstances, but he manages to get the most out of that circumstance. And that's why I look at Will Levis, and I'm starting to think, like, listen, it ain't just the offensive line. It's him as well.
Yeah, no, I think that there's 2 elements, I think, of playing quarterback that don't really get talked about, but they're a way bigger deal. So the number one thing is, like, you got to be a traffic cop as a quarterback. And so what I mean by that is, like, so you always have it, and you know this, D-Mace, like, you always have guys, like, as you break the huddle, it's like, what's it on? Wait, did you say slot? Or, like, where am I lined up? Like, what? Like, and so as a quarterback, like, you have to control the environment of, like, making sure that everybody knows what to do. So, like, you're a traffic cop. Like, you got young players, and it's like, hey, no, I actually want you to tighten your split down just 2 inches, just 2 yards, because, like, it's going to make a difference in our spacing. And so I think, like, there's that element, like, that never makes SportsCenter in terms of a highlight or something like that. But it can be the difference of converting on 3rd down and not. So, like, you got to be a traffic cop. The other thing you are as a quarterback is you're an eraser. And so when your left guard gets beat and it should be a negative play, but you just know where your outlet is. And so now you throw a check down for 2 yards, or you're able to, play on time enough where the ball gets away and it's an incomplete pass, but it's not a negative play. Like, you being an eraser has just made your offense better. And so I think Andy Dalton is like the perfect example of that, obviously he has the experience and the wisdom of playing, but like, he's a great traffic cop, and then he's a great eraser.
Yeah.
Like, he is.
Sounds like Levis, those are two areas, if he could grow in, that could help him in a lot of ways. Tim Hasselbeck is with us. Tim, one thing that we haven't discussed a lot, and it's early, but it's one thing that is starting to maybe have people asking the question, with Brian Callahan as a first-year young head coach and a first-time play caller, calling plays from the sideline, where his perspective in the past has been in the press box. I think I probably am one that probably didn't think about how much that is on a first-year guy's plate as a change. I think he's dealt with it pretty well so far, but it is a lot, and it makes me wonder how difficult that job is.
Yeah, I'm sure it's really hard. Somebody is relying heavily on.
Are you talking from experience, head coach?
My 5 games of experience, I can tell you that. I mean, look, I'm not calling the plays, and it is a huge benefit to not be calling the plays. It's a huge benefit to be able to trust somebody that is calling the plays, right? And so, yeah, there's no question it's a lot. Now, I just guarantee you, with the guys that he has on his staff, that he's getting, incredible support. And I think this too, and this is where it gets really tricky. If Will Levis doesn't make 2 really bad decisions, and if punt protection is better, well, like, you're talking about 2 wins. And so, I think that there's part of it where it's like, you can look at him and look at Brian Callahan and be like, they're struggling, and the quarterback, and like, oh, hey, this is really bad. And it's like, honestly, like, maybe he's actually been doing a pretty good job. And like, there's a couple of these things that have happened that, like, I don't care if it was Vince Lombardi, like,
Right.
like, honestly, like, those are 2 wins.
Yeah, and even you could point to just a couple of plays in the Packers game that they go different. You're at least in the game. Let me throw this at you, too, because we did a study last night. We went back through, the 3 of us, it was a kind of our homework assignment, and tried to find situations.
Well, hold on a second. So 2 of the 3 of you did it, because there's no way D Mace.
Well, D Mace has come up. D Mace had the hypothesis, I would say, right?
I had the thought, Willie, because they are the number guys. I'm not getting to the numbers that fast. Before I can even think about it, either Willie or Adam has the numbers.
Okay, so
there we go.
Here's the D Mace.
It works at Michigan State. Somebody's going to take care of that for me.
So the D Mace hypothesis is and I think I asked you a hypothetical like this last week of, is there merit to the idea of, okay, slow it down for Will Levis, get off the ride for a couple weeks, and then we'll find a way to get you back on the ride, and hopefully you'll have a reset. This happens in other sports, right? Guys get sent to the minors in baseball, guys in hockey get sent to the minors, and that's what you don't have in football. But it works there. That's how you develop guys, and they go through a process, and eventually you find out if the guy can play. But we had D Mace's point is, once you go away from a guy, you almost never go back to that guy. And history has shown that that's pretty much true. There aren't that many examples of my thought of get off the ride and we'll find the next entry point somewhere down the road to get you back in there. It doesn't happen very much unless it's with another team.
Correct. And I think that part of it too is, the message to the locker room of like, hey, do we believe in and trust this guy? I think the other thing is too, is like back to the Andy Dalton situation. The better that went for Andy Dalton, the worse that it appeared to be for Bryce Young. Right? So it's like, hey, we still believe in you, but we just want you to come stand next to me on the sideline for a little bit, take a couple of breaths, and like let's just watch it. And then that guy goes in and plays great, and you're like, oh, okay, wait a minute, like maybe it was you, right? Like that's also the risk in it. Like so, look, they just played out with the Titans. What if they say, a couple of bad decisions. Hey, just this isn't for good. There's going to be a re-entry point, but we just need you to like come hang over here for a little bit, take a breath, recalibrate. And then Mason Rudolph goes in and starts lighting things up. Like now there's no re-entry point, right? And so I think that I think that there just has to be some caution because of that.
Tim, if you have any homework you would like to assign Derek, by all means.
I mean,
I'm done doing
Mace
homework.
doing homework. Like
my days of
We've
doing
retired
homework
from homework.
ended the day I left college.
Hey, I can picture him at a Pilates class before I can picture him doing homework. Okay?
Tim Hasselbeck.
That's part of the homework, Pilates, okay?
It's part of his PE homework.
Yeah.
Tim Hasselbeck joining us as he does every Tuesday. Tim, thanks for chatting. We'll talk next week.
All right, see you guys.
Yep.
Tim Hasselbeck joining us as he does every Tuesday at 11:30. 615-737-1025. We will react to what Tim had to say, but specifically one thing that Willie asked him about. I'd like to talk about that next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game.
Derek Mason here, and if you injured yourself in a motorcycle accident, go to lawtigers.com for your free case evaluation. Even if your accident was months ago, you have nothing to lose by calling Law Tigers. Insurance companies want to pay out as little as possible or frankly nothing at all. Law Tigers make sure you get the compensation you deserve and doesn't get paid until your case has been settled. They understand how much your bike gear is worth to you and will help you get it all repaired or replaced. Law Tigers is the resource the motorcycle community turns to when in need. So whether supporting an event or if they see you broken down on the side of the road, with Law Tigers, you'll never ride alone. So call 1-800-LAW-TIGERS or visit lawtigers.com. Law Tigers is powered by Freeman Infusion, and they're located in Nashville at 2126 21st Ave South. That's Law Tigers, Tennessee's motorcycle lawyer.
Join Jared Stillman, Chris Sanders, and Derek Mason at Twin Peaks in Madison at 2151 Gallatin Pike North for a Monday Night Football edition of the pregame show from 4 to 6 p.m. They will break down the Titans' Week 4 matchup against the Miami Dolphins and give you the latest updates before the game. The pregame show is presented by Parman Tractor and Equipment, Sundeck Nashville, Sloan's Motorcycle ATV, and award-winning Blue Note Juke Joint and Blue Note Crossroads Bourbon. Willie Donick, Derek Mason with Adam Vingan here. We were just talking to Tim Hasselbeck. Willie, you asked a question of Tim, and we received a text on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com to a similar effect from Justin in Greenbrier, who writes, in all seriousness, I know that he is new and is trying to adjust to all of the new. Brian Callahan should Brian Callahan hand over the play calling to Nick Holtz if they lose Monday. They have the bye week to work on the change, but that takes the pressure off of Callahan.
I think if you in this hypothetical, if you're 0-4 and you can't beat the Dolphins with their quarterback situation, even though the Dolphins still have a lot of good players, probably more dynamic players. It's not probably, it's a fact. They still have more high-end players than the Titans do, and you got to go down there. But if you're 0-4, I think you have to look at everything. I would say, though, D-Mace, in the big picture, his mentor is a guy that does what Callahan is doing now, and that's the head coach of the Bengals. The 0-3 Bengals, by the way. That's an issue. But this guy, this guy has proven that it can be done. I just think it's an interesting situation for a new head coach and a struggling team. It's a guy that there's a lot to like about. There's a lot to like about Brian Callahan, but that is an awful lot of workload for a first-year guy. He has had to deal with a ton. And some things are completely out of his control. You can't coach a right tackle that just falls down or 2 punts blocked. That's I don't think that's coaching. That's just like, wow, how could that? That's a tough hand to be dealt.
Yeah, it is. And I'm not, and I don't think we are saying in regards to Brian Callahan that he should no longer be the play caller. You're not saying that, right, Willie?
I'm not saying he should scrap it right now.
Exactly.
I think this is, again, I have the perspective, and I think the Titans probably should have couched this a little better. I think this is an exploratory year. It's a rebuilding team. I think you take a full season to sort some of this stuff out, and you evaluate these things maybe at the end of the season and not after 3 games. Where Jared Stillman yesterday, it was Armageddon, panic button. I'm glad Jared is not my crisis management coach. But when you're in the storm, you have to buckle down, right? You can't just hit the panic button. But I think you try to sort through questions like this.
Yeah, you're gonna have to, and this is something that Brian Callahan, and because listen, he has a lot on his plate. I don't envy him not one bit. That's why some of the things he's doing, he gets a pass in a sense. We gave Vrabel a pass his first year. Some of the bonehead things he did as a head coach. Why? Because he was a first-year head coach, feeling his way through things. And I'm sure he would tell you, man, I did some things my first year that, goodness gracious, I'm glad we made it through. And I'm glad I didn't get fired. But he was better off the second year because of that. That's how I look at Brian Callahan. Is I am not going to jump on him because he decided to. Now, it was odd, but I'm not going to really get on him because he decided to not go for it. But then it seems like the fans started to
burn a timeout.
He burns a timeout and then he goes for it.
Right.
But
just burning a timeout is a penalty against your team, even if you get it, because when you're coming from behind, that is a very valuable.
You need that timeout.
Golden,
you may need that timeout.
Mike Vrabel used to call it the golden ticket, right? Those 3 timeouts are golden, and to lose one on the first possession of the second half, that's a big price to pay.
But I'm not going to fault him. Like, I'm not gonna really get on him for doing that. He's a first-year head coach. That goes along with the process. But I think there's going to come a time. I believe like Zach Taylor did as well. You got to understand his first 2 seasons were not good whatsoever.
They were 1-10 to start,
but eventually they got it right. They stuck with the process. He remained the play caller, and look at what they are as an offense. Now, I know they're 0-3, but that's still a damn good offense. Maybe, just maybe, for Brian Callahan, I'm not saying that some of that responsibility should be taken away, but I'm not going to, fault him for mistakes that he makes, this year, whether it be play calling or calling for, a punt, but then calling the timeout and going for it and still not making it. Those are first year head coaches mistakes. I guarantee you, Ryan made them in Houston. They've made everywhere. So I'm not going to hold him to that, and penalize him greatly for it. But it's going to have to get better moving forward. The play calling, the way the offense runs, it's going to have to get better, because if it doesn't, then that's when, based on what we've seen from Amy, she can make a decision very quickly, at a drop of a dime. And I'm not saying she's making it this year or next year, but if nothing changes, there's a possibility that she will.
615-737-1025. We'll continue the conversation next. Tune in to the Chase and Big Joe show tomorrow from 9 to 11 a.m. for your chance to win all-inclusive tickets in the Eurostone Club to WWE Friday Night SmackDown at Bridgestone Arena on Friday, October 4th. Contest presented by Green Trees, a family-owned cannabis company and dispensary providing high-quality legal THC products. Check them out online at greentreescompany.com. D Mace, Vingen, and Donick 1025 1063 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingen, Nick Frazier, holding it all together for us as he does every day. So Willie mentioned this with Tim Hasselbeck. We assigned ourselves some homework yesterday, I guess, except for Derek. Derek, the dog, ate his homework, I guess. But Willie and I did some homework. It was, to Willie's credit, as he said to Tim Hasselbeck earlier, it was Derek's idea. So Willie and
brainchild.
Willie and I did the research because this is where it came from. I presented to the group over the weekend that if I were Brian Callahan after the Titans lost to the Packers to fall to 0-3, I would sit Will Levis in week 4 against the Dolphins. And then he has the bye week because the Titans have a week 5 bye week to clear his mind. So that's 2 weeks where Will Levis could take a step back before starting in week 6, to which Derek replied, if they go away from Will Levis, they're not coming back. So it got us thinking about examples. I tried to look more recently of examples of quarterbacks who were benched by their team, who then rebounded from that benching
at an early age,
who then rebounded from that benching and have remained with that team. So, for example, Sam Darnold, who was having an excellent start to his season with the Minnesota Vikings, he was cast aside in New York. He was cast aside in Carolina. He served as Brock Purdy's backup last season, and now he is having an excellent start to his season with the Minnesota Vikings. Baker Mayfield along similar lines. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about quarterbacks.
These are not examples of what we're looking for, because these guys who have bounced back, it's been years later with a different team.
Yes. So I am looking for examples, or I was looking for examples of quarterbacks who were benched by their team, who then came back and started for that team.
And then remained the starter.
Yes.
Better off for have sitting for a while. I thought that there would be a lot of examples of those.
There were not.
There were not. And one that popped into my mind from a long time ago, which I went and gave you guys the details on, was John Elway. Now, this is ancient history, but remember, John Elway was the first pick in the draft, but famously refused to play for the Colts, the team that drafted him. A brutally bad. The last year's in Baltimore, and a year later, they took the moving trucks, the Mayflower vans, and drove to Indianapolis in the middle of the night. It was awful. He didn't want to play for them, understandably so. So he got traded to a team that was already pretty decent, the Broncos. That having been said, they sort of force-fed him in there. They had to keep him from wanting to play baseball, which is another leverage point that Elway had way back then. But he struggled terribly for about 5 games, Elway did. They benched him. They got him off the ride. They had a veteran in Steve DeBerg, who was the security blanket for about 5 great quarterbacks, including Joe Montana and Vinny Testaverde and a bunch of other guys. He always seemed to be that guy. He stabilized them, and then they went back to Elway down the stretch of the season. What's interesting is that team made the playoffs, not because of great quarterback play, but they had enough to get in there, and they actually started DeBerg in the playoff game and not Elway. So I thought, hey, look, there's got to be a lot of examples of this, right? A young quarterback who they give the reins to, they realize he's not ready, they take a step back, and then they put him back in. That's kind of what happened in Elway's first year. But I honestly went back through every quarterback. I took a list of the quarterbacks, and it's fun to read the list. Guys like Jonathan Crompton and Greg McElroy. And I'm just pulling out names from the past. Christian Ponder. Guys who got a shot somewhere along the line. And I thought, look, there's got to be some. I found maybe one, and I don't even know the details, but Alex Smith, who, by the way, was very outspoken about throwing quarterbacks to the wolves too early. Alex Smith on a really bad 49ers team in, I think, 2005. He was the first pick in the draft. He started a few games. Then he sat for about 6 games. And I'm unclear if they were injury related or they just got him out of there. And then he came back and started 4 or 5 games down the stretch, won a couple, and started progressing from there. But I could hardly come up with any examples. I thought I would find some of a guy that went through what I would propose could be talked about.
Mhm.
Go with Mason Rudolph for a few weeks, find the on-ramp to get him back in there, and see if he's been able to hit the reset button and be better for it. I was shocked at how few teams have tried that.
The closest I could find in recent memory was Tua Tagovailoa. When he made his first career start in week 8 of 2020, Ryan Fitzpatrick started for the Dolphins. Before that, Tua makes his first career start in week 8. He is benched by Brian Flores, and we remember the Tua Brian Flores thing from over the offseason.
Got messy.
Yes. So Tua made his first start in week 8 of 2020, replacing Ryan Fitzpatrick. Flores benched Tua in the fourth quarter of a week 11 game and put Fitzpatrick in. Tua came back to start in week 13 because he missed week 12 with an injury. So Fitzpatrick started in week 12 only because Tua was injured. But Tua came back in week 13. And then once again, he was benched in the fourth quarter of a week 16 game before starting week 17. So Tua was benched twice in his first season with the Dolphins, but only in the fourth quarter of 2 games. It wasn't a full game.
Now I'm sure we can find more examples of coaches doing that. Fourth quarter, games out of reach, rookie quarterback. Come on, pull them out. Let them watch for a bit. Let their veteran guy. You don't want them to get hurt out there because now you got to pass the ball and teams are pinning their ears, back and they're just coming after you. So let's bring you out, throw the backup in, and let's do it like that. There's more examples of that than I think of the latter, because my belief and my history of watching and playing in this league, once you go away from that guy that you drafted, especially in the first round, if it's not because of injury, you're not going back to him. That's just the way it is, because now the guy has lost all confidence. When you remove him from underneath center, what you're telling the team, what you're telling management, and what you're telling fans is he's not good enough to be your starting quarterback. So we're going to our backup. There's no way, unless the guy that you put in gets injured, there's no way you're going back to the starting quarterback. You're just not doing that. Other than injury, and maybe, just maybe, if the head coach gets fired, the new coach comes in and say, I see something in this kid. Let's try this one more time. That's the only way. That's the only reason why he gets back into the lineup. Because once you've removed him, it's not like any other position. It's not like a receiver position. It's not like a defensive lineman position or a secondary position. It's the quarterback. Once you go away from him, you can't come back to him.
And there are examples where a guy resurfaces.
Now, he may go on exactly
on another team,
absolutely,
in another setting.
It may look better.
Pressure's off. They can bounce back. And Baker Mayfield and the early returns on Sam Darnold would be examples of that. But I was shocked that D. Mace's hypothesis of once you go away, you cannot bring him back. I was stunned at how often that's true. Maybe my follow-up question might be, why haven't teams tried that more?
We do have a texter who brings up an example that could work in this situation. Unnamed texter. So give me one of those quarterbacks.
Okay, let's go with the one, the only Jimmy Clausen.
Jimmy Clausen says Kirk Cousins was benched in 2014 by the Redskins. He was named the starter again in 2015 and won the division and took them to the playoffs.
Who's this?
Kirk Cousins.
I looked at Kirk
Washington.
Cousins. He basically sat and was not really the starter for about 3 years. He only started a couple of games. I'll pull it back up. I looked at that this morning.
A few people have mentioned Zach Wilson with the New York Jets,
right. And you see,
but I believe that was injury. I believe part of
they made it seem like it was injury.
Right.
They made it seem like it was
now. Wasn't
there
a story where wasn't there a story that he allegedly told Robert Saleh, like, I don't want to start, like they had to put him back in. He was like, I don't want to. Wasn't there some?
I'm a little foggy about that, but that one certainly doesn't have a happy ending.
I was about to say nobody wants to be compared to Zach Wilson,
right?
So that doesn't give us
The only
happy
reason,
ending.
and we know what happened last year. He got to play only because of the crazy early injury to Rodgers. But the year before, there might have been a yank him in, yank him out. I think the kid from or the guy from Western Kentucky, Mike White, went in there for a while.
But I think the premise
was
he
on
was
and off.
injured.
He might have been injured. But again, this is not
And
what
again,
you want
you're
to have
right.
happen here.
You
But
could be right.
Cousins had 3 seasons where he started his first 3 years, 1 game, 3 games, 0-3, 5 games, 1-4.
So look at
I don't know if
look
he
at
squandered.
2014. Look at 2014 because that's when he was benched before being named the starting quarterback in 2015.
Okay, let me look at the game log and find out when those 5 starts. He only started 5, so it's not like he started the whole year. But
according to this story on ESPN.com, was it Jay Gruden was the coach of the Redskins at the time.
He did start. It looks like 5 consecutive games early in the season in the first 7 weeks. He didn't start the first 2 games.
Okay,
came off the bench. Looks like in a win, and then got 5 starts, and then did not start the rest of the season.
I would assume that Robert Griffin was starting that season, and I would assume Robert Griffin would have been the starter for the Redskins in Week 1 that year before Cousins.
Yep, RG3,
and then Colt McCoy
did not do well. Colt McCoy got some starts as well. So
that could be an example. But then Kirk Cousins flourished once he left and went to Minnesota.
Kirk Cousins too, I think, was a little bit more of an underdog, not a first round pick, more of a mid round pick that sort of was emerging.
He was never considered their franchise.
He wasn't the guy they set up to be the guy, right?
Kyle,
he just kept coming back. RG3 was the guy.
Kyle, who was the unnamed texter, he made sure to give us his name this time.
Kyle.
Okay. Kyle says Kirk Cousins, he wanted to clarify, Kirk Cousins was named starter in 2014, then got benched after a few games, then starter again in 2015.
Yeah. But I would consider him more of a
and it was the same
underdog
that
rose up from obscurity and not handed the job. It was a lot of issues with RG3 after RG3 had the great start, got injured, tried to play through it, never really recovered. So I would say sort of special circumstances, but we're reaching, I think, to find. I think this is.
That could be that is an example.
Fair
it's
point.
A fair example of a guy getting benched and then the team having to come back to him, and what ultimately happened in that whole situation. Kirk Cousins didn't want to be there. They
didn't commit to him.
Yeah, they didn't commit to him. They traded.
Remember
him.
there was a deal like a couple years in a row. They franchised him, right? And
they didn't want to give him a long-term contract, so he just kept on getting these 1-year deals, which means they were not solely sold on him. And then he goes to Minnesota, and obviously he does well in Minnesota. So, but that is a example of, going with the starter, going away from him and coming back. But that's one of how many? Like 1,000 of them.
We're struggling to come up with even 5.
But that is a good example.
And we're talking about 25 years of NFL history. We're talking about since the Titans have been in the league. Basically, we're scraping together examples that are sort of in this category, but it hasn't been tried too often. Especially in a situation where Levis, who's not a first-round pick, but he's a guy that they have said, let's give this guy a chance. Let's put some guys around him, and let's find out if he can play. I thought it was sound thinking in what they've tried to do. So far, it's not working. And so the question is, what do you do? Do you ride it? How long do you ride it? Or do you stop the ride for a minute and then put him back on the ride a little later in the season? But we're finding that there are very few examples of teams that have even tried that.
It's again,
once they move on, they're done. They move on to something else.
Move on, and I would love to see also sort of like the caveat to them. Why did they make the change? Was the backup quarterback who they made the starter was that bad? So then they had to go back to the starter, because in this situation we're talking about that if you go away from Will Levis, I don't think you can come back, but if Mason Rudolph plays well, he's done. Mason Rudolph would have to play extremely bad football,
or they just have to lose every game.
But I
To where
think
you're like, hey, we
I
have
think in
nothing to
that
lose now.
process, you're like, you don't care because you're going, you assume you would have a top 3 pick. So you'll be like, what the hell with it? I might as well just stick with that. And at least
Bring in Tim Boyle.
there's a sort of silver lining at the end of us, at the end of the season, we may end up with the first overall pick or no worse than the 3rd overall pick.
615-737-1025. If you have examples of this situation, you can call us or text us 615-737-1025. Though, Derek, you presented a hypothesis. Willie and I tested that hypothesis, and it appears that your hypothesis was correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
our science
Ding, ding,
teachers
ding, ding,
would
ding,
all
ding,
be very
ding.
happy that we did this exercise because that was the thing, right? Here's your hypothesis. Let's go through the evidence and let's conclude one way or the other. So the science fair,
So y'all was
I give us an A
so
as
I
a
was,
group project. the
I
three
was
of us.
basically sort of like the science teacher, like, hey, here's the hypothesis, people. Now y'all figure it out.
I remember the day of the science fair, and one year I learned my lesson. I did something I didn't have any interest in at all. I didn't want to do it, and I got a bad grade it was awful. But you had to do the hypothesis and all this stuff. So I was like, darn it, I'm doing something fun. And so I went to the batting cages, and we had a hypothesis of heavy or light bats, and we just hit for like 3 hours at a time. We're like, this is great. Now this is a science project, and I got an A because of that. The teachers loved it.
There you go.
I
Thinking
don't know if we
outside the
proved
box.
anything, but we got to hit for hours.
He was
Follow-
thinking inside the batter's box.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
inside
The great Tom Amansky in the batting cages, Orlando, Florida. Yep.
Follow your dreams, kids. Anything is possible. 615-737-1025. This week's Nashville Best Deal is Premier 6 Theater at 810 Northwest Broad Street in Murfreesboro. Whether you're a fan of timeless classics or can't wait for the newest releases, Premier 6 Theater has something for everyone. Go to thegamenashville.com/deals and get half off a $50 gift card while supplies last. D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you, talking about quarterbacks being benched and remaining viable starters with the teams that benched them. Jason in Manchester on our text line points something out that's somewhat related to what the Titans are going through. He says, in a way, Mason Rudolph falls into this category with the Steelers, because if I remember my timeline correctly, Kenny Pickett gets injured. The Steelers go to Mitch Trubisky.
Mm-hmm.
He stinks. Mason Rudolph comes in. He's winning. Pickett is healthy. But Mason Rudolph starts the playoff game for the Steelers.
Right.
Now they're all gone. Now they
That's
replaced
one
all of
chapter.
them.
There was
Yes.
a chapter even before that where Rudolph, I think, got to start some games when Roethlisberger was injured.
That yes,
I think,
I forgot about
But
that.
that again, it's still.
But he was never
different.
sort of handed the
it's
job
still
and say,
different
"Here's
from-
you're the guy. Let's see what you
Exactly.
can do."
He was put in that position because of injury. And then when a guy comes back, when a guy isn't injured anymore because you're winning, you just stick with them. I look at that totally different from benching Pickett because he's horrible and then going back to Pickett after the second choice or the third choice didn't work.
We have some quarterback-related news. According to Adam Schefter, Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel said quarterback Skylar Thompson is considered day-to-day with his chest injury, but the team still is mulling other quarterback options. McDaniel said also it was a possibility for sure, quote unquote, that Tyler Huntley would be Miami's starting quarterback on Monday against the Titans. So according to Mike McDaniel, it is a possibility that Tyler Huntley would start at quarterback for the Dolphins on Monday against the Titans.
Now let's do a little refresher on Tyler Huntley, because you might be sitting there going, "Okay,
He was with the Ravens. He got drafted by the Ravens, I believe.
that's correct."
Undrafted free agent. Started some games, did well.
So he's probably most known a couple years ago when Lamar Jackson got the late season injury.
Mhm.
He started 4 games, won 2, and then started the playoff game.
Which he should have won.
They almost pulled off. It was against
It's
the
the
Bengals.
fumble at
Yeah.
the goal line when he tried
Yeah.
to dive over the top and extend the ball. You kick a field goal, you win. I think that's how it was. But they were going in for a touchdown. They knocked the ball out, and the defensive end gets it and runs back for a touchdown.
Yeah.
Who was it? I think it starts with an R. Reacher or they end up getting the fumble recovery and running it in for a touchdown. And ultimately, that was the end of the game, the game-winning touchdown.
So he played some important games. He's only started 9 in his career. He started 4 in 2021 and 4 in 2022 as Lamar Jackson's backup. I do think that poses a bigger threat than the other guys they had in the wake of
Thompson,
Lockett.
and-
Tyler Huntley was a Pro Bowler
Yeah.
in 2022. Now he
There's
was
a caveat to that,
yes,
okay? It's a
he
caveat.
was perhaps the replacement for the replacement.
No, he was a replacement for the replacement for the replacement.
Give me a break.
But it says on his Pro Football Reference page,
PB.
one-time Pro Bowl.
PB.
Hey, that's
Yeah.
all you.
It says
Hey,
PB next
So-
he was
year.
a Pro Bowler. That's
He's,
all that
he
matters.
is a Pro Bowler.
Explain that.
Put
I
some
don't-
respect on Tyler
Give the man
Huntley's
some
name.
flowers. Come on, man.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
His Pro Bowl year, he had a 77.2 passer rating,
Hey, Willie, he made the Pro Bowl. That's all that matters.
a QB rating of 43. Nothing to write home about. I mean, please.
But he was
please.
a Pro Bowler,
Averaged
Willie.
109 yards per game.
But he was
passing.
a Pro Bowler, man. He was a
So if
Pro
the
Bowler.
Titans lose to Tyler
It says
Huntley,
PB.
people can say, well, what did you expect?
There-
Tyler
there's a
Huntley
Pro
is a
Bowler.
Pro Bowler.
Yeah.
How did they just sign him?
Yeah, they signed with the practice squad, I think maybe a month ago, somewhere around that number.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, it may not even been that long.
The plot
I don't think.
thickens.
I will say,
Will,
though,
will
like,
this affect the line? That's the
100%.
question.
I think
You
it'll
think so?
affect, yeah, about
Yeah.
like maybe 3 points potentially, maybe 2.5.
He was released by the Browns. He was with the Browns. Never played for them in as late as March of 2024.
Mhm. Which means
So
they
he was
cut him.
he was cut, in training camp by the Browns,
Mhm.
August 29th. Picked up by the Ravens to the practice squad, and then picked up off of the Ravens practice squad by
Mhm.
the Dolphins, if I've got this right.
And now he is apparently in
In
line
there.
to start.
On Monday Night Football.
On
That would be
Monday
one
Night
where Howard
Football.
Cosell would
Oh,
bring
man.
it, build it up. And now he is starting for the Miami Dolphins on Monday Night Football.
He's a Pro Bowler, Willie.
He's a Pro Bowler.
He's a Pro Bowler.
Pro Bowl quarterback.
Just remember, if the Titans lose to Tyler Huntley, you can say, well, he was a Pro Bowler. What could the Titans do?
Goodness, what next?
It's no worse than
now,
losing.
based on how Malik Willis
Exactly,
played,
that's what I'm saying.
jeez.
I'm not
Anything.
putting anything is
Anything is
possible.
possible.
Like
Anything is
Kevin
possible.
Garnett
They have a
said.
similar
Malik
play
Willis
art.
sure looked like a Pro Bowler.
They have a similar play art too, like Malik Willis way he
Yeah.
runs. You know what I mean? Along with Tyler Huntley, like they have there are a lot of similarities in their games.
Yeah, well, we'll see if he does play. What will the line end up being? What if indeed
probably
he
moving
is
as
named
we
the
speak.
The starter. It's +1 right now, or -1 for the Titans. Will it change if the third stringer is not underneath center?
The plot thickens, but I want to get to a conversation that I see a lot on the text line. We've discussed it here. I see plenty of chatter about it on social media. It's the ultimate chicken or egg scenario. Are Will Levis's struggles a product of the offensive line, or is Will Levis simply struggling regardless of the protection he is receiving? And as we all know, the Titans' offensive line is porous at best. According to Next Gen Stats, the Titans' offensive line has allowed Will Levis to be pressured on 47% of his dropbacks, the highest rate in the league. Nicholas Petit-Frere leads the NFL in pressures allowed with 19, while left guard Peter Skoronski leads all interior offensive linemen in pressures allowed with 18. So that is the ultimate chicken or egg question. If Will Levis were behind a league average offensive line, would he look any differently? Or does it really not matter what the offensive line, how the offensive line is performing? It's simply a product of Will Levis and his struggles to be a quarterback.
Don't you have the numbers? If I'm not mistaken, one of you, don't y'all have the numbers of Will Levis under duress and Will Levis with the clean pocket?
I can find them.
Because I think we talked about them yesterday or sometime last week. The numbers, whereas they are better, but they're not still winning football. Under duress, he's probably somewhere close to the teens. But with a clean pocket, it's not like he's completing 80% of his passes.
Bill Barnwell on ESPN wrote, I believe this was yesterday, that from a clean pocket, Levis's 46.8 QBR ranks 29th.
It's still not good football. So we can discuss, was it the chicken or the egg? Which one is first? Well, the numbers tell you that it's Will Levis, regardless of whether the pocket is clean or whether the pocket is dirty. Will Levis is still the same quarterback. It may jump up a little bit with the clean pocket, but it's not winning football. It's not consistent winning football.
Because I think I would add that any quarterback under a heavy pass rush becomes a lesser quarterback,
Absolutely.
right? Where even if it's Tom Brady, right? I mean, every quarterback. I mean, there are some that handle the pressure better, and I do think that Levis is probably in that category of struggles under pressure, but everybody relatively struggles under pressure. So I do think that is the stat that probably answers the question the best, is that even when the pocket is clean, he has still had some issues. His stats are not super impressive.
Adam in Portland is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Adam, go ahead.
Let me ask you this, Adam, because I've got a feeling what the other two dudes are going to say, and I know nobody's going to like it. But if you were to call somebody, say you're Rand, and they're like, what can Rand do? If you were to get somebody on the phone and say, hey, I'll trade Big Jeff right now for a decent tackle, offensive tackle, would you do that trade?
Are we talking about a comparable tackle in the league in terms of his perception as people perceive Jeffrey Simmons to be?
But if you ask Big Jeff, he's the best player in the NFL. But if you ask him what he really is, he's really cost us 2 games or been part of costing us 2 games. So what I'm saying is if you could take him for what he is, around that contract, what he's getting paid in the league, top 10 offensive tackle, would you trade him straight out for that?
I would consider it. Yes. If I am getting an offensive tackle that rates at his position similarly to what Jeffrey Simmons people believe Jeffrey Simmons rates at his position, I would consider it.
Okay,
yes.
is this hypothetical? The salaries are the same.
Let's say that for that case. Thanks for the call, Adam.
Thank you, Adam. It doesn't matter if the salaries are the same, the players are comparable as far as, okay, you're rated the 10th best or the 5th best defensive line, and you're rated the 5th or 10th best right tackle.
I'm going to find this out right now, actually.
Adam, no team under their right mind will trade away their tackle for a defensive lineman. Again, I'm going to repeat that. No team, I don't care who it is, no team is trading away their young stud right tackle for a defensive lineman. Honestly, they would have a hard time trading for making that trade if it was Aaron Donald, because offensive linemen, you need those guys. I can play around if I don't have an Aaron Donald or Jeffrey Simmons. I can sort of mask it a little bit. But as we have seen with the Tennessee Titans, I can't mask it if I don't have a good right tackle. So no team under their right mind is going to give away their stud right tackle for a guy that's a top 10 player at his position on a defensive line.
So I went and looked at where Jeffrey Simmons ranked among defensive tackles and Jeremy Fowler's positional rankings he does over the summer. Mm-hmm. Simmons was 4th among defensive tackles. So then I went to the offensive tackles list to see who the 4th ranked offensive tackle was. And that is Tristan Wirfs of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I'm not giving up Tristan Wirfs for Jeffrey Simmons. And Jeffrey Simmons
I
is
think
a
that's
good
the
player.
answer. I think most teams would absolutely.
But he asked if I would do it.
Oh,
and the answer is I would. I don't think NFL executives would, but I would.
I think NFL executives would do it if you're getting the offensive lineman. I just don't think you would find a partner willing to trade. I think that's your point.
You would have to give up something else. It couldn't be a 1-for-1 trade. No, you would have to give up at least a 2nd-round pick, maybe even a first round pick, because you evaluate offensive linemen much different than you do defensive linemen. We've seen it for the last 2.5 years. And I'll go back to what Jared said. You want me to tell the right tackle story?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Please don't.
Okay.
We hear that enough from 2 to 6.
So with that being said, if I have me a stud right tackle, you would have to give me Jeffrey Simmons and a 1st-round pick. And I'm talking about a high 1st-round pick to get my stud right tackle. If you're not giving that up, no deal.
They are harder to find.
Yes.
Little Jared Stillman's first words are going to be right tackle. You're going to meet that kid for the first time, and you'll be like, hey, little Jared, right tackle. That's what little Jared Stillman's, because I don't know what his name is going to be yet. But little Jared Stillman,
he or she, yeah.
I believe he's having a boy, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay.
So little Jared Stillman, his first words will be right tackle. 615-737-1025. Where do you fall on this chicken or egg conversation? Is Will Levis a byproduct of the offensive line, or is his performance independent of his offensive line? 615-737-1025. Coming up next, there is a play, one of the sacks that Will Levis took on Sunday. I'm going to show it to Derek during the break because I'm going to want to break it down. I think this may help us answer this question. So we'll do that next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D-Mace, Vingen, and Donick, 1025, 1063, the game, discussing Will Levis and the Titans' offensive line, the chicken or egg scenario. And there is one play that I saw clipped on Twitter by Mike Herndon of paulkoharski.com, who does an excellent job with video analysis. And he points to the sack. Remember, Will Levis was sacked 8 times on Sunday. Herndon highlights the sack that Levis took on 2nd and 8 in the 4th quarter. And Herndon writes, it's a clean pocket. His receiver is open. Burke's running the vertical route outside, but Levis drifts into pressure and takes the sack on 2nd and 8 instead. Herndon continues, it's true that the O-line isn't good enough and that Levis is doing them no favors. A quarterback's role in his own protection is massive, and Levis's inability to help himself in that regard through 12 starts is concerning. So, Derek, you looked at that play during the break. I imagine you see the same thing that Mike Herndon saw last night.
Yeah, but this is not the first time that I've seen this. It's not the first time that we've talked about or I brought up, Will's sort of his problems within the pocket. That even last year he developed bad habits. I'm not sure if he developed bad habits or they were just there and you saw them on full display last season and you're seeing the same things this season. When things tend to get a little hairy in the pocket or when they don't, Will Levis has a bad habit of drifting in the pocket. Watch him compared to some of these other quarterbacks in the NFL. They don't drift. They sit in the pocket. Now, if they do drift, it's because the pressure is coming at them from one direction, so they're trying to get out the way. But we've seen more times, or at least I've seen more times than not, where Will Levis, even if it's that slight yard and a half, or half a yard of him drifting, that means a lot in relations to where the defensive lineman is, or relation to where your offensive lineman is positioning himself to block. They are expecting you to more than likely to help them in a situation that if indeed they do get beat. Tim said it. You are a traffic cop and you have to be an eraser because everything's not going to go perfect. But when it does go semi-perfect, you then can't be a part of it ending up not perfect. And in that case, the play that you sent me, and we can put that play out so people can take a look at it. But that play, you had a clean pocket. You drift into the sack. The guy had, Cushenberry had his man. If you just stay within the pocket or step up in the pocket slightly to your right, you have a better opportunity at either running or dirting the ball. But because you drifted into the sort of rush, you negated anything that you possibly would have had because there wasn't much. It was a 2-man route. They played, zone coverage. They ran the perfect coverage against what you were calling, but you made it even worse because you drifted into a sack that never should have happened. They were rushing 3 players, I believe. 3 or 4 players. You got 5 on 3 or 5 on 4. There's no way you should get sacked. The pocket was there for you to sit in and either deliver the ball or throw it out of bounds. It was because of Will Levis that it ended up being a sack. And that goes against who? Peter Skoronski and not Will Levis.
And Peter Skoronski's grades fall. And I do remember distinctly I don't listen to the Bussin' with the Boys in full every week. I hear bits and pieces of different episodes, but that is one thing I remember Taylor Lewan saying is that the grades of an offensive lineman sometimes match up with what a lineman does in a self-evaluation, and other times it can be unfair. It's like you take it when you get the good grades. Yeah. He was kind of joking, like, okay, if you say I played great, okay, maybe I didn't think I played that great, but I'll take the good grades. But sometimes on the other side, good example of Skoronski's getting killed for bad grades, but there's an example of I thought he did a pretty good job doing what he was supposed to do, and yet it's going against him on a sack. One thing I heard Brian Callahan say when he was asked this kind of thing, was it on the line or was it on Levis? He said a number of the sacks were in the second half when they were behind, and he felt like we had to call plays that were slow developing, that we're trying to get big plays, and that puts you in a tough spot. You're going to get sacked sometimes when you have to hold the ball because you're looking down the field. And he said, I could have called plays. If my goal was to just avoid sacks, I could have thrown check downs, avoided hits, and avoided sacks, but we weren't going to get first downs, and we were going to lose the game. So he didn't want to give up on the game. And how many of the sacks were in the fourth quarter? I think 3 or 4, right? They were a bunch late.
Here's a theory of mine based upon what you just said, Willie.
But because that was his answer. I'm not saying but I do think there is merit to that. You got to take chances when you're behind,
exactly.
or you're saying I give up the game. I'm giving up.
Absolutely. But here's a theory that I have, because listen, you're not down. You haven't been down that many points in any one of these games, in any one of them, that made you feel that, man, I got to start taking chances. Unless it was like the last 3 minutes of the game, I understand it. Then you got to get into your 2-minute offense, even though there's 4 to 3 minutes left. You got to get into it because you got to score fast. But it makes me believe that he doesn't trust Will Levis. He doesn't trust that Will Levis will do the simple things to move him down the field. He thinks that, man, I got to call these deep shots, even though my offensive line isn't blocking well. But more importantly, I don't trust my quarterback that he can take the short passes consistently and move us down the field, because you see quarterbacks do that. Like in the last 4 minutes of games, we've seen a Tom Brady, or we've seen a Joe Burrow, or we've seen a Patrick Mahomes take the dumps, take them. Why? Because they, in their minds, I'm going to dump it 3 yards, but I expect my running back to get 6 or 7. So we're moving the ball down the field, and we're in our hurry-up offense. They don't think we got to get big chunks. No, they're just moving the ball. They're staying within their offense, and they're moving it down methodically. Why? Because those coaches trust their quarterback that he's going to make the right decision. I don't think Brian Callahan trusts Will Levis enough in those situations that he can take the profit and keep us moving down the field.
You said something to me yesterday when we were off air that I thought was interesting. We were, of course, talking about the game on Sunday, and we were talking about how Malik Willis went about his job on Sunday. And you said that's what Will Levis should be doing. And I looked this up. Malik Willis has attempted 34 passes since coming in for Jordan Love. 25 of them have been under 10 air yards. So 25 short passes, 5 intermediate passes, 4 deep passes. And you said to me, Will Levis should be attacking the game like Malik Willis did on Sunday.
Because that allows you, because my thing is, you haven't been down that many points where you couldn't have done that.
Well, but they were down by 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, right? That's why the sack fumble, the whiff by Petit Frere was so bad, because they were still in the game. They didn't have to take too many chances, but I felt like after that was early in the fourth quarter, then they had to they had to take shots.
Here's another example. Fourth and 2.
Well, that's death. That's a different stage of the game.
4th and 2. No, but what I'm saying is it goes along to what I believe. I'm not saying it's true, but what I believe. It's 4th and 2. I just called a timeout. I called a play that I think, okay, we should be able to get this first down. I call it. It's open. Throw the ball. Pollard is right there. Throw it. And let him let that guy come up and make a tackle. Force that guy to make a tackle on Pollard one-on-one, because that's what it would have been, a one-on-one tackle from the side. Let him make that tackle. But Will Levis didn't throw the football. That's trust. I don't have trust in you now. I called a play for us to get the ball out of your hands quickly, and you couldn't do that with the guy standing in front of you. Force that guy to make the tackle. Malik Willis would have threw that ball. I guarantee you 100% Malik Willis would have threw that ball and would have just lived with, hey, that's what coach wanted me to do. He didn't break the tackle. We didn't get it. But instead, you stared at it, looked up top, and it still was open. You still didn't throw the football. I can't trust you no more. Or I'm losing trust in you as a head coach because I gave you the play on a platter. And you could have thrown it, but you chose not to.
615-737-1025. We'll park the Titans conversation for a moment. We will get into some college football coming up next. Big games this past weekend for different reasons for the University of Tennessee and Vanderbilt. We'll discuss those next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D-Mace, Vingen, and Donick, 1025, 1063 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason with Adam Vingen. We're going to take a little bit of a Titans break to discuss the local and somewhat local collegiate football teams. I guess Knoxville's not really local, but, same state, more or less.
Local enough.
Local enough. So both teams had important games over the weekend. We'll start with Tennessee because they won. The Volunteers went to Oklahoma, defeated the number 15 Sooners 25-15 in what was a statement game for the Volunteers. Through the first few weeks of the season, they had passed the eye test, but they win a true road game against a top 15 opponent. There are still some tough games left for Tennessee. They still have to face Alabama and Georgia, but a big win for the Volunteers to prove that they deserve to be very much in the conversation for the college football playoff. Guys, based on what you were able to watch, what did you make of Tennessee's win against Oklahoma over the weekend?
I mean, this is a legit team. I think this team is better than the team 2 years ago under Hendon Hooker. I think they are a more balanced team. Obviously, a lot of people are raving about what they've been able to do on the offensive side of the ball. I get it with Nico underneath center, but it's their defense that has been lights out. It's going to be because of their defense that either Tennessee wins a championship or loses a championship. This defense is sort of reminiscent of those old Alabama defenses where, hey, listen, we can win a game, we can blow you out, or we can win a game where our defense is only giving up, 15 points, 14 points. That's how good this defense is. More importantly, that defensive line is the best defensive line in all of college football. And what does that do? That helps the secondary become one of the best secondaries in college football. So to me, this team they have right now is the best team I've seen them have in the last 5 to 7 years.
They just looked flat out better
Yeah.
than Oklahoma. And they did it at Oklahoma on a night game where that place was packed. It's a huge game for that program. Thought it said a lot. Oklahoma, of course, didn't. I think if they're looking back on the game, they're saying our quarterback really had a terrible first half. There were a couple of big plays that Oklahoma made to create turnovers that put them in a great spot. And what did they do? They turned it right back over. So that was a little bit fortunate for Tennessee, but some of it is you got to give Tennessee credit for forcing the turnover. But I still think if you're looking at those two teams, you're saying Tennessee is just quite a bit better than Oklahoma. And not that this is a great Oklahoma team, but I think it still says something that you could go on a road in a road atmosphere like that and look like it. But one of the examples is the way they ran the ball. They had a touchdown drive where I think they ran it 6 or 7 straight times with the same guy and just said, you can't stop us. And they didn't even have to pull out the tricks of the up tempo. Let's challenge you by running super fast at you before you can set up, and we're going to throw it out to the boundary. We're going to come back and we're going to do this or that. It was straight up the middle. You can't stop us because we're bigger and stronger and better than you. That's a really impressive sign. And Nico looks like the real deal, right? I think I did wonder, okay, is this guy, can he live up to the hype? It's still early. There are big games to be played, but he's passing the tests to me.
To Derek's point, according to ESPN, the Volunteers are number 1 in the country in defensive efficiency. Overall efficiency, they're also number 1 in the country, according to ESPN. So number 1 overall, 16th in offensive efficiency, first in defensive efficiency. Easy for me to say. But, on paper, they certainly have the type of team that could challenge for a national title. Now, they are off this week. They play at Arkansas on Saturday, October 5th, when they return to action. They've got a game at home against Alabama on October 19th, and they're at Georgia on November 16th. So those are their two hardest remaining games for Tennessee. But it was important for them to win that first true road game at Oklahoma to bolster their resume for the college football playoff.
So it's interesting. You have Georgia, Alabama this week. You have Alabama, Vanderbilt, and then Alabama, and then you have Georgia, Tennessee. There's a lot of interesting games. I think what we're finding out too is with the portal, and we're going to talk about Vanderbilt in a minute, but what you can see in college football is what you saw in college basketball and college baseball. I think it's starting to take shape more in college football, that the vast turnover in rosters can make the games a little more unpredictable. And I was not a subscriber to this for a while. I was skeptical, and I still don't like all the roster turnover, but it does kind of create a wild card factor of you can be a different team the following year. Almost like a team that signs a bunch of free agents in another sport, in a pro sport. You can do that, and all of a sudden you look like a totally different team, literally. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Don't you think Georgia looks a little more beatable than they have before? So what we all think, you just assume Georgia's, pencil Georgia in, nobody's going to beat them. Maybe they'll lose one. I think there's a little more hope with what Tennessee's doing that they could line up against Georgia.
Well, there has to be. I mean, if Georgia has struggled a little bit. Now, listen, they're still a hell of a team under Kirby Smart, but we've seen them struggle somewhat. Now, Tennessee hasn't played the schedule, at least I don't believe they've played the sort of schedule that Georgia has played, with Georgia having to play Alabama this upcoming weekend. But Tennessee has shown that, listen, from a defensive standpoint, regardless of who we're playing, and this is what I like about UT, because sometimes you see teams, when they play lesser opponents, they sort of play to the level of the opponent, and they end up giving up, scores that they shouldn't. UT hadn't been that way. They've been dominating opponents, regardless of who they're playing. And it didn't change last week when they played at Oklahoma, and I don't think it's going to change moving forward. I would venture to say, as I did 2 years ago, I said that at the beginning of the season, UT would beat both Alabama and Georgia. They ended up beating Alabama, lost to Georgia because of turnover. They were in that game for the most part, or at least up to half, and then they made some crucial turnovers. They dropped touchdowns, which caused Georgia to sort of, get a lead on them, and they were never able to recover. This team's better. I do predict that UT beat both Georgia and Alabama this season. They play both of them, right?
They do.
Yeah, I predict they beat both Georgia and Alabama. That's how good I believe their team is, and it's all predicated on what I've seen from their defense.
So Tennessee is off this week. They are at Arkansas on October 5th, home to Florida on October 12th, home to Alabama on October 19th. Those are the Volunteers' next 3 games. They're at Georgia on November 16th. On the flip side, Vanderbilt, after a tough loss to Georgia State, we wondered how they would regroup. And by the way, because Vanderbilt is off this week, Clark Lee will not be joining us for his normally scheduled 1:30 interview. Instead, Max Hers will be subbing in. We'll talk some Predators at 1:30. So Clark Lee will return to this program next week when Vanderbilt prepares for a home game against Alabama next Saturday. So the Crimson Tide will be in town to face Vanderbilt next week. But Vanderbilt goes on the road to number 7 Missouri. It's a tight game. They force overtime late in the fourth quarter. If I'm not mistaken, they were leading in overtime.
Mm-hmm. They scored on the first possession of overtime to go up by 7 and put the pressure on Missouri, who then scored on the first play of overtime. That was the a tough mistake there.
That to me is when I thought this might not be happening for Vanderbilt. They go up 27-20, and on the first play, now Luther Burden is a fabulous receiver, one of the best in the country. But one play, touchdown, I said, that might be it for Vanderbilt in this one.
But they come right back, hold Missouri to a field goal.
Yes.
Which is, you'll take that every time in the second overtime. So they are with the ball, touchdown wins the game. They get called for, I think, a bogus offensive pass interference, which is a drive killer kind of thing, to make it 3rd and 18. I just thought it was a ridiculous call to make at the time that they made it. And yes, am I looking at it from Vanderbilt's perspective? Yes, I can't deny that. I think D. Mesa will back me up on that call. But long story short, they recovered. They had a nice 3rd down play to get back into a very reasonable field goal, and the guy choked. I mean, I've seen a lot of Vanderbilt kickers do it. They choked. It should have gone to a 3rd overtime. That being said, the fact that they got to that point in the game where you're saying you've got Missouri on the ropes is a big testament to how different the team is this year than last year. No moral victories. I get all that, but I was stunned at how well they played. That was not Missouri came in and coughed it up 4 times. That was a straight up number 17 team in the league playing at home. Vanderbilt was in that game from the start to the finish, and it wasn't because they were handed a bunch of breaks, other than the fact that the Missouri kicker missed a couple field goals.
So I wanted to ask Derek about that offensive pass interference call. If I recall correctly, the color guy on the game mentioned that if that receiver would not have committed that penalty, it would have been an interception. So better to take out the defensive back and commit a penalty than to have that be a game-ending interception, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, he did say that. But if you watch the play and listen, it's a bang bang play. It's going in, it's going 100 miles per hour, and it's sort of hard for the ref to see. Did he really was it really offensive pass interference, or did he fall and not necessarily grab him? It was a football move by everybody. The way I saw it was, once they slowed it down, it was a football move. He didn't reach out and grab him. But hey, listen, by the letter of the law, was it a pass interference? It's a judgment call. So yes, they called it. But would I've called that in that situation? No, I wouldn't have. It wasn't like, the guy just ran up there and knew he wasn't getting the football and grabbed him and tackled him to the ground. I get there, reached out to him to try to, so he wouldn't get the ball and, sort of knocked his hand down or grabbed his arm. That didn't happen. That ball was more uncatchable than it was catchable, at least to me. But they called it. Vanderbilt, to me, is a team that, yes, they're getting better. Yes, the culture is changing around there, but it hasn't changed enough because they keep making these bonehead mistakes. They do. And I'm not even talking about the pass interference. It's not what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about the first play after you scored a touchdown in overtime, and then for some reason the best receiver on their team gets lined up one-on-one with a guy, and I think it was a bust in the coverage.
Yeah, they overloaded the side.
Yeah,
and they created confusion.
And it was a bust in the coverage.
It's like, what do you call it, D-Mace, where you line up 2 guys on the line and 1 guy staggered behind him?
It was
3 guys stacked.
It was
and
basically
so you
a
have to
bunch
communicate of who's got who, right? It's just like when in basketball, if there's a bunch of screens, the defense has to communicate. Am I switching? Am I staying with my guy? And if you don't, it's a layup.
Exactly.
And that's what happened. They were late picking up the guy that was the biggest threat, and he made the play.
If I'm covering anybody, it's going to be that guy.
They still they don't have the margin for error to make some of the bonehead penalties that they've had. They had
Sounds
penalties.
like another team in town.
But let me say this. They have come a long way in their talent that when they're making these things, they're still in the game. Last year, they didn't have the talent to even stay on the field with these teams. So that's extremely encouraging. It kind of gets Clark Lee back in the game. They want to stick with Clark Lee for the long haul, but they could not sit there and watch another season of what happened last year where they're just not competitive. So I'm really curious where it goes from here because there's a lot to like. Diego Pavia that was another game where, man, in the trenches, that's the guy you want in your in your foxhole with you, man. That guy believes good things are going to happen.
Ben says
plays.
Ben says on our text line, it's unfortunate that Vandy can build a team like this, but will likely never be able to compete for a natty. Just not possible to get in the same zip code. If the stars align, it'll be amazing, but in no world should anyone ever expect it.
I'm
Let's
not
worry about
saying-
a natty.
yeah, I'm not talking about a
Let's
natty
talk
or
about
anything.
winning record, knocking off some people.
That was a winnable game. The
right.
Missouri
You had
game
a
was a
chance to
winnable
knock
game
somebody good
for
off there.
Vandy.
Yeah.
But it just like in every other game, you've managed to come back. Why? Because of your quarterback. Your quarterback plays winning football. Everybody else has to start playing winning football. Again, I think Clark Lee has done a wonderful job at sort of assembling the team that he wants, buying into what he's preaching. But you still have those mistakes being made. And a lot of times it's made on the defensive side of the ball, whether it's late hits, penalties,
The late hit was bad.
blown coverages. We've seen it every week. There's like one or two plays that just, puts Vanderbilt in a position where now they got to rely on Pavia to come down and make some type of dramatic, last ditch effort to win the game. And he's been able to do it at times, but they can't expect him to do it every game.
Let's go back to that text for a minute, because I'll give you my vision for what a good Vanderbilt football program is. And that would be, you win the games you're supposed to win to give yourself a chance. And then if there is a program that is down, you're good enough to beat that program in the league. And then if it lines up and you can knock off a couple of teams that you're not supposed to beat, that's all anybody really wants. Of all the Vanderbilt fans I know, nobody's sitting there going, you got to win a national championship, even though Clark Lee believes he can take it to heights that it hasn't seen before. But I think of James Franklin's teams. I think of Derek Mason's best teams. And Derek Mason did have his moments, right? He had a win at Georgia. He beat Tennessee 3 straight times. I believe two out of three out of 5, something like that. He beat Tennessee multiple times. Mm-hmm. Any Vanderbilt team will sign up with that. Bobby Johnson's best teams. If you could just knock off a couple of teams and feel like you've got a chance, that's good. And that was a great example on Saturday. That's a game that they were not supposed to, like in last year. I don't think I would have even had any hope. I was curious about Saturday, despite the loss to Georgia State. And it was even beyond my expectation. And it was the way that it happened. Like I said, if Missouri had come out and just been totally flat, turned it over 2 or 3 times, done a bunch of dumb stuff, then I would have said, okay, it was a little fluky. But they stood toe-to-toe with them in a lot of areas where the last few teams have not looked anywhere close to that. So I'm encouraged. But as D-May said, the key is going to be being opportunistic, not wilting a little bit when that big moment happens. So where does it go from here? At least they are keeping a lot of intrigue.
So which of the remaining SEC games, to use your point, Willie, maybe taking advantage of a program in the SEC that's maybe a little bit down. So which of the remaining SEC games, let me rephrase, which is the most winnable? I don't think anyone's expecting them to beat Alabama or Texas or LSU or Tennessee, which leaves at Kentucky, at Auburn, and home to South Carolina.
I think all 3 of those games, I would hope that if Vanderbilt puts a good performance out on the field, that they will be right in the game with a chance to win. The other games, I do think, I don't, LSU is, I don't know about LSU. They're definitely going to be favored. Let's just take what the point spread last year in most of the conference games was at least 12 or 13, if not 18 or 19. And of course, against the Georgias and the top dogs, it was 27, 28, right? I think they're playing at a clip that they're not going to be that big of an underdog, relatively speaking, this year. Now, what does that mean if you don't win any of the games? Not much, right? You want to knock off a couple of those teams. But I feel like this team has enough to where they're capable if they are opportunistic.
So Vanderbilt is off this week. And as I said, Clark Lee will rejoin us next week for his normal interview at 1:30 on Tuesday. They host number 4 Alabama on Saturday, next Saturday at 3:15.
I haven't seen an early line from that one, but remember Alabama, and we'll see how Alabama. This will be coming off of the Georgia game, so it may not be the worst time to play Alabama.
So
I'm not saying they're going to win, but this is another litmus test. Is it going to be a nice, fun party for the Alabama fans to come in and win 50-0, which I've seen in that stadium, or are they going to make Alabama work a little bit to where it's an entertaining game to watch and you feel like the program is progressing? There's a big, big difference in the two, in my mind.
So following their home game against Alabama next Saturday, they're at Kentucky on October 12th, home to Ball State on October 19th, before welcoming the current number 1 team in the country, the Texas Longhorns, will be on West End on Saturday, October 26th. That is a tough, tough schedule for Vanderbilt. A heartbreaking loss, 30-27 in double overtime to Missouri. We will catch up with Clark Lee next week, but in his place, no one better than Max Hers of the Predators Radio Network. We will talk some Predators with Max Hers coming up next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game.
Football is back, everyone, and what better way to bet on big games than on Zen Sports, the new sports book in Tennessee that is bringing sports betting to a whole new level, and I mean that literally. We had 2 games last night, and if you pick the Washington Commanders on Zen Sports app, then you've won big, okay? Or if you pick the Buffalo Bills, then you definitely won big. So when you sign up for Zen Sports, you'll automatically earn up to $100, no danger first wager. If your first bet loses, you will be reimbursed for the amount of your bet up to $100, people. And now that football season has started, Zen Sports has launched their revamped betting platform for both college football and the NFL. And what's better? With our new look, Zen Sports will offer daily promotions, including odd boosts, same-game parlays, no danger wagers, and much more. Zen Sports also offers a one-of-a-kind VIP reward program. If you qualify, you'll earn monthly comps at sporting events, concerts, which we have many of, and even sport book bonuses. The VIP program is by invite only, so if you feel that your Zen Sports play qualifies for the VIP consideration, check out the program details and apply at zensports.com/VIP. So what are you waiting for, football fans? Start betting with Zen Sports, where you will receive true odds on all parlays and an enhanced user experience for all. Get going and download their app at zensports.com today. That's Zen Sports, where betting just got better. And remember, gambling problems, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee.
D-Mace, Vingen, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3, the game. The magic of live radio. Sometimes you have to pivot. And our friend Max Hers has some Predators radio. I said Pradio. There you go. Pradio Network.
Preds Radio,
Pradio. Max Hers has some Preds Radio Network duties to attend to. So he will join us tomorrow for some Predators talk. But we will still talk Predators for this segment, just without Max Hers. So I caught something very interesting this morning. By the way, here's a shameless plug for myself. The season premiere of Predators Insiders is this evening at 6 o'clock.
Oh, very nice.
After Stillman and Company. It will normally come on Wednesdays at 6, but because of the Gold Star scrimmage tomorrow, Predators Insiders will be on tonight at 6 o'clock following Stillman and Company. I will have a rotating cast of co-hosts this week. It was our dear friend Nick Keyser. So myself and Keyser will have Predators Insiders with you tonight at 6 o'clock. But I noticed this tweet from Alex Daugherty of the Tennessean, who was at practice today. Power play units for the Nashville Predators. And I saw that first power play unit, and boy, oh boy, I was rubbing my hands together like, this is nice. Let me read to you the first power play unit. Philip Forsberg, Steven Stamkos, Ryan O'Reilly, Jonathan Marchessault, and Roman Josi, which is, on paper, an outstanding first power play unit. Now they have to mesh, but they all have extreme talent. I would assume they would be able to get along swimmingly on the power play. And I've said this a few times over the course of the past few months, especially after free agency. If I'm Andrew Brunette, so Alex Daugherty lists a second power play unit here, which, by the way, Philip Tomasino, Luke Evangelista, Tommy Novak, Gus Nyquist, and Brady Shea, according to Alex Daugherty. That's your second power play unit. If I'm Andrew Brunette, I have no use for a second power play unit. That first power play unit is on the ice for 2 minutes. The best power plays in the league, they stick those 5 players out for 2 minutes. That's what I'm doing with that group. That's just me.
That's how most teams do it now. The number one power play unit is probably going to play 2/3, if not 3/4 of the overall time in a given power play, as opposed to how teams used to do it, where you try to maybe evenly put 2 power play units together. There still are a few teams that will do it that way. It is interesting. A couple of things on that. Sometimes there can be great power plays for a season where you look at the names and you're like, how are they doing this?
Mm-hmm.
The names aren't nearly as formidable as what you would say. And then on the other hand, you can put together some names that look really scary on paper, and you look and you see where they ranked in the power play, and it's 23rd or 25th or something like that. One of the things that people have asked about that group of 5.
I'll give you a perfect example of that. The Pittsburgh Penguins. The Pittsburgh Penguins last season had no fewer than 3 future Hall of Famers, sometimes 4, on their top power play unit. Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, Erik Karlsson. They finished 30th.
Great example.
In the NHL.
Great example. And
okay.
they're not alone. They're not alone.
Please continue.
So those names absolutely are going to get the other team's attention. But you mentioned it. You've got to work on the chemistry. Where does everybody line up? What role do they play? Who carries the puck into the zone? There are little things that you don't even really think about. You think about, oh, this guy can score a lot of goals, or that guy can score a lot of goals. But you have to have, for example, let's look at Gus Nyquist, who is the odd man out on that group. Gus Nyquist was essential last year for the power play success. And one of the things he did was he was the guy that would bring the puck in. He would be the guy that they put in the position more often than not of making the decision at the line. Do I pass it? Do I carry it in? What's the best way for us to get in and get set up so we can go to work? They'll have to compensate for that, not if he's not on that first power play unit. Now, these are not etched in stone at all. This will be a work in progress. The other thing I hear a lot of experts ask is left shot, right shot. How do all the sticks line up, and are they going to mesh the way that they need to? I think we would assume that Steven Stamkos is going to be on the far side with the right-hand shot.
Left circle. That's
In
where
the
he's
le-
going to
in
live.
the
Have
left
him now.
circle.
That's where he's going to live.
We know where he's going to be, and that's a
Yes.
weapon the Predators have seldom, if ever, had in their franchise history. I can think of Ryan Ellis, who had that type of shot, and maybe one or two others. Yeah, I think Eli Tolvanen in his best moments, maybe, even though he didn't shoot that side. But
You're talking from
Stamkos-
that specific side or just one-timers on the power play?
I
Because
guess a
Shea Weber
combination of both.
Weber had a fabulous slap shot.
But
It's a
right, but
different-
he was doing it from the point.
Yes.
In kind of an old school way, long distance, and he could still do it. But Stamkos is a unique weapon that is going to change everything. So how do the other people maneuver around that? Forsberg likes to play. Forsberg is really not a one-timer guy when you think about it. So he likes being on the opposite side as a left shot, or I'm sorry, as a right shot, who kind of likes shooting from that right circle, if you will, pulling it in. You can vision him swooping in, either passing or shooting, or passing it over to Stamkos. So I think that looks like a good fit. Yossi at the top. And then how do Marchessault and O'Reilly fit on the other two spots? Those are the things.
I would put O'Reilly at the net front, like right in the crease, and I would put Marchessault in that bumper role in the slot, in the high slot.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, but O'Reilly was more of the bumper last year, and he led the team in
That's
power
a better
play
question
goals.
for you.
I believe he was more of the bumper position last year, so he can do anything. And the other thing I heard Hal Gill say is they would like to take a little bit off of Ryan O'Reilly's plate, so he's not always out there on the power play and always out there on the penalty kill. So that's something to look for as well. So this will be a work in progress, and just because you have 5 great names on a sheet of paper does not always mean that that's your best way of doing the power play. But it is very intriguing.
Now, as it sits now, would Roman Yossi be the primary puck handler in this situation?
He'll be the guy running the show at the top, but the question is, what's your best method of getting the puck in and getting set up? Because he got a lot of help.
You got
from
3 other
Nyquist
40
there.
goal scorers on this
Yeah.
power play. So
It's
like hell, like Isaiah Thomas having, or any great point guard having like 3 scores. Like I could just pick my guy I want to throw it to or pass it to. Kevin Durant, Michael Jordan, Steph Curry. Which one do I want them to get
It's a
the
great
ball?
question, because I think you have to have the mentality is we don't really care who ends up getting the most goals. It's collectively, how are we getting a high percentage? And are we taking what if the defense takes away one thing, the other guy is going to beat you. That's the best power play to me. Is you can't, if you're the penalty kill, you can't eliminate all the options. There are too many good options, and over time, you're going to be effective. That's what was desperately needed in that playoff series last year, and they just couldn't get to a level. There weren't enough layers to it to get that big goal when it counted.
The Predators were 2 for 22 on the power play against the Canucks. If they score a few more power play goals, it's possible they win that series. As simplistic as that sounds, but that was a razor's edge type of series. The final goal tally was 13-12 and 6 games in favor of Vancouver. I did see something interesting the other day, that the Predators are the first team in NHL history to add 2 40 goal scorers in a single offseason, because Stamkos and Marchessault scored 40 goals for their respective former teams last season, and of course come here in free agency. First time ever, apparently, according to the NHL, that one team has added 2 40 goal scorers in a single offseason.
And I would be careful if you are a casual fan, because I will predict right now, they're not going to come in and each score 40. That's an unreasonable expectation. And they don't need to each score 40 for them to be successful pickups. I think they could be as effective as they need to be if they score between 20 and 30. But they're added to a group that already has some things going for you. You've got Forsberg and Yossi. You've got other guys who are good guys at chipping in. So they don't have to score 40 to be worth that. So I think let's put that out there I think maybe one of them does, but they don't have to. I don't think. Do you agree with that, Adam? I don't think in the midway of the season saying, well, so he's not going to get to 40. What's going on? Something's wrong. That may not necessarily be the case.
Well, Marchessault was a first-time 40-goal scorer.
Right, he's never done it before.
11th season, if I'm not mistaken.
He's much more of a 25 to 30 kind of guy most years.
The question I keep going back to, we're talking about the power play, and if those two are on the power play with Roman Josi and Philip Forsberg and Ryan O'Reilly, they could score a lot of goals that way. My question is, what happens with Stamkos's and Marchessault's production at 5-on-5? Because presumably they're playing with each other and they're both talented players. But Tommy Novak is a step down in skill from the centers those two are used to playing with. Stamkos spent a lot of time playing with Braden Point. When Jack Eichel was traded from Buffalo to Vegas, he and Marchessault were attached to the hip, basically, on the top line with Ivan Barbashev on the other side. And that line played a huge role in the Golden Knights winning the Stanley Cup. So I'm curious about their production at 5-on-5, because the skill of specifically their center is going to be lower than what they're used to. And I don't know if there's a number that can quantify that, but something tells me respectfully with Tommy Novak, they may not have the same production 5-on-5 that they did with their previous teams.
And we don't even know if that line is going to be together the whole year. But I would agree with you. I'm not expecting dominant play on the same level. And I think that's one question. That's one thing that you hear about why did Tampa do what they did and be willing to walk away from Stamkos, is that there have been signs that he has not been as dominant 5-on-5 the last couple of years. He's been a guy that really racks up huge power play numbers, but I'll take that if I'm the Predators. And so I'm going to stay with the theme of, I don't know that those two guys have to individually each have huge seasons to be effective. And when I say effective enough to get them into the playoffs. And then that's where hopefully you're going to see the real value in those guys, is their ability to, in playoff games, be difference makers. That's really where they're going to prove, I think, their worth, because I think they're adding to a roster that was already pretty good and making them even deeper. So what they bring, who has the big year, who has the off year, is not as important as when they get to the playoffs, are they a better team that has more ways to beat you than the last handful of Predator teams that have not been able to get out of the first round?
So Neil on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, said Marchessault had 25 goals at even strength last season. That is probably true. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I assume Neil is telling me the truth. But he was playing on a line with Jack Eichel. I mean, that's different.
Right. But Eichel missed a lot of the season.
That is true. And Ricky pushes back on my assertion. He says, a player like Stamkos elevates his line mates and makes his center better. Don't underestimate the value of having a veteran leader who's won and taking a 50-point center and making them a 70-point center, because he could finish and put the puck in the net or dish it off and set someone else up. I don't think that's a fair comparison to say that there's a drop-off. I understand what Ricky is saying. I think I'm just curious about it, because with all due respect to the high-end talent that the Nashville Predators have, and they have a solid collection of players, there is no one on this roster who passes the puck like Nikita Kucherov. Zero.
No, there's nobody in the world.
Yeah,
really.
Like it's Nathan McKinnon and Connor McDavid and Nikita Kucherov. That's really the rarefied air.
They're in a class by themselves.
Right.
They're an elite.
And
it's like you say, D-Mace, a lot of Mahomes is in a class by himself.
Yes.
I think Kucherov and a few other players would fit that bill, that there's nobody that you can say. And there's, that's why Tommy Novak makes whatever, 3.1 million, and Kucherov makes 9 or 10 million.
Right. But my point,
difference.
Yes, there is a bit of a difference. My point is that
your Braden point?
Yeah. My Braden point is that Steven Stamkos is not going to be getting these excellent passes from Nikita Kucherov on a regular basis.
No question. He probably won't have as many points, perhaps, or many goals. But I do think we have to see of what it is when Roman Josi and those guys are passing it to him. I will say this. On the flip side, Tommy Novak has never played with guys the caliber of Marchessault
that is true.
or Stamkos. So they had the line in Florida. It was Stamkos, Novak, and Evangelista. We'll see how they tinker with that. But I think Novak can benefit as well from playing with better players because I do think he has that great instinct offensively. He's a very good vision guy. He sees the ice. He's creative, and he's a good enough shooter that you have to respect him as a shooter. And I think they are really hoping that clicks.
I'm open-minded. I'm just telling you that if I had a concern about these new players, it's just how much of a drop-off in offensive production might there be because of the change of scenery. But again, I am open-minded. I am happy to admit when I am wrong. 615-737-1025. We're going to wrap up the show with a lesson in etiquette because some people out there need it. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. I think we can touch on the Dan Campbell thing here. Oh, God, yeah.
D Mason here, and if you injured yourself in a motorcycle accident, go to lawtiger.com for your free case evaluation. Even if your accident was months ago, you have nothing to lose by calling Law Tigers. Insurance companies wants to pay out as little as possible or frankly nothing at all. Law Tigers make sure you get the compensation you deserve and doesn't get paid until your case has been settled. They understand how much your biking gear is worth to you people. So they will help you get it all repaired and replaced Let me say that. Law Tigers is the resource the motorcycle community turns to when in need. So whether it's supporting events or if they see you broken down on the side of the road, with Law Tigers, you'll never ride alone. So call 1-800-LAW-TIGERS or visit their website at lawtigers.com. Law Tigers is powered by Freeman and Fusion, and you can find them, or they're located in Nashville at 2126 21st Ave South. That's Law Tigers, Tennessee's motorcycle lawyers.
D-Mace, Vingen, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Final segment, Stillman and Company, coming up next here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. And quickly, a lesson in etiquette, people. If you recall last week, Will Levis mentioned that someone leaked his phone number and he had to change his phone number. There was a story along similar lines that ended up being much worse. The headline from ESPN: report Lions Dan Campbell doxxed by daughter's classmate. And
can we get a definition of doxxed?
Yeah.
It's when you
DOXXED.
DOXXED. It's when you search for or publish private or identifying information of somebody.
Okay.
So
Again,
according to this
Teammates, our
report,
vocab expands since we
Absolutely.
became DVD.
I was going to text him earlier. I was like,
Hey,
what?
doxed.
Doxed?
I like it.
Doxed.
I like it.
doxed is
Have
a
you
good-
ever been doxed?
I probably have been.
Fortunately, I have not. But you may have remembered from a few weeks ago, Dan Campbell had and his family, head coach of the Detroit Lions, they had to move because of multiple instances of harassment and unwanted visitors at his home, specifically after the Lions lost to the 49ers in the NFC title game. So there's a new report that it was a high school classmate of Dan Campbell's daughter who posted the family's home address on Snapchat with the accompanying text of, quote, dumb F trying to go for it. Because you remember the Lions went for it on 4th down at the end of that game. So because one of his daughter's classmates was upset by his coaching, he shared their home address so that they could be antagonized at their home. Just what is wrong with people?
I will
That's
say
it.
this, D-Mace. If I am the Campbell household, I don't know if that broke the law or not. But one way or the other, I am ordering the code red on that dude, man. And that guy is toast. There will be consequences.
Listen.
I can't tell you exactly what I would have done,
Yeah.
but I am just using the term code red.
I'm with you,
Dude,
Willie.
you better sleep with one eye open.
Hey, Willie, I'm with you. Because listen, there are some things that you just know that just crosses the line. I don't care if you're 15, 16, 17, or if you're 46, 47, 48. You know some things you just don't do. You just don't do. And you don't dismiss it because, oh, he's a teenager or she's no. You know not to do that because you would want your information being posted around to everybody. That's a situation where, I'm Willie. I'm calling the code red. I'm not telling you what
Lieutenant
that code
Kendrick.
red is, but if I'm one of the siblings, we all getting together and we all determining what's gonna go down. I'm not saying what it is,
Yeah.
but we all gonna go. We can go talk to the person. That's it.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
I will tell him. I would tell him
Have
on
a
the
talk.
high school
Have a talk.
on the high school hallways.
Yeah.
I would say when you least expect it,
Mhm.
expect it. So just be ready. And I'm getting Colonel Jessup. I'm getting Lieutenant Kendrick, and I'm just gonna have them kind of shadow for a while
Uh-huh.
and just kind of hover around this
Yeah.
guy and say, just
You see it?
let
We
me
see you.
let me introduce you to
Yeah.
my friends.
We see you. We see
And
you.
then when the time is right, you'll say, "Did you order the code red?" You know what the response is. You're right, I did.
According to the report, the daughter's classmate was identified on January 29th and questioned by investigators. The classmate said he and his friends were, quote unquote, distraught by the Lions' loss to the 49ers and that he, quote unquote, found humor. In the Snapchat post, the classmate and his friends later drove to the Campbell's residence, parked on the street, and were, quote, yelling not nice things toward the house, end quote, before leaving.
Can I ask a question?
You may.
Did that guy like when the Lions were 0-16
I'm sure he did.
or
That
4-12
little kid, I'm sure they didn't.
or 3-13?
Nope.
Does he see a difference in this Lions team to be that upset compared to what the Lions have been for decades before he was born and up through most of his childhood? I mean, how about a little perspective here, man? What in the heck?
I just don't understand.
That alone should
sometimes
be worth a code red. Just
why
not
pe- yeah.
appreciating how good they have been compared to what they have been.
I don't understand what people think nowadays. I don't know why you thought that that was going to be a good idea to, drive to somebody's street, sit on their street and yell whatever you were yelling at their home. Why? Because they didn't win a football game. I swear, it's not that serious. It is not that serious. And I'm sure you don't believe it was that serious. You just did it just because you felt you could. That's why. You wasn't that damn distraught. You did it because you felt you could. And there was not going to be any repercussions. You know why you don't feel that there was going to be any repercussions, or why I know you didn't think or feel you were going to get any repercussions? Because you put it on your TikTok and you put it under your name and you put their address on it. So you knew exactly what you were doing, and you didn't think you thought there would be no consequences. I would suspend your ass for the rest of the year and wouldn't let you come back to school. That's what I would do. Homeschool it, be with your mom and your daddy, okay? And if you do something there, I'm sending them to jail after that.
The lesson here on D. Mays, Vinged, and Donick: don't be a garbage person. Simple as that. Don't be a garbage person. If you're upset that your team lost, don't go leaking someone's address or phone number.
Do not dox.
No doxing. They just learned doxing today. So don't go about doing it, the two of you. That will do it for us. Stillman and Company coming up next, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Be love on your people. Have a wonderful and blessed Tuesday. Peace, and who ordered the code red?